Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Judas and the Black Messiah. I think you could mistake and enjoy this film as just a sort of typical undercover crime movie, basically, much like Donnie Brasco or something like that. But in fact, I find this film to be far more radical than any of those are. They might, have people wear suits and, acknowledge the time period, but none of them are trying to be as politically active as this film is and as radical and as anti-authoritarian as this film is. This film makes me question, did the studio system know this was happening, or is the studio system this cool? Can crime movies be this interesting and fascinating and at the same time actually make me look up history and sort of engage with it? And Judas and the Black Messiah is that, but at the same time it's sort of doing what a great crime movie does. It sort of reminds me kind of the idea of The Godfather. Let's take this Italian crime family, put some Shakespearean elements into it, direct the fuck out of it, and let's make this almost what would now be considered a prestige thing or whatever. Judas and the Black Messiah takes the real life story of how the FBI killed Fred Hampton and how the FBI basically tried to destroy black leadership in the 1960s. That's something you should know. That is an actual thing that actually happens. The US government took out large black voices in the late 1960s because they did not want the growing civil rights movement to gain any power or even political power in the future. The FBI did take apart the Black Panthers. That is an absolute 100% thing that really happened. You should know. I think it's always been known. I didn't know the logistics of it, but I've always known that the FBI took down the Black Panthers as they were gaining steam and basically mainly doing social programs that we should probably have in the fucking first place and still don't, because they were threatened by people, giving breakfast to little kids. That's literally what they did. In fact, called that nefarious, giving breakfast to little kids. Anyway, the FBI is racist, and particularly was at the time, and the US government's racist, but this should not be a shock to you. But this film is basically taking all of these crime things and making it a more prestige thing, but going through three perspectives, which it semi-breaks from that. Now I think it doesn't. Maybe a little, but it's mainly about the three perspectives. You have Daniel Kaluuya's Fred Hampton, who is an amazing leader, is able to unite the Chicago gangs and try to enact social change and do a lot of amazing things. And you see the power of the Black Panthers and how he's able to do those things. Whereas at the same time, you say William O'Neill, who is apolitical going into this, has mainly been indoctrinated by the FBI because he's trying to not go to jail for stealing cars, in a scene that they make look way cooler than it actually was in real life. But I don't really mind. When I heard the real life story, I was like, okay guys, I like your sequence better, so it's cool. And you kind of see him going from someone who's apolitical, could care less about the Black Panthers, to becoming really understanding the power behind them, but also being conflicted where he wants to be a part of the FBI. He wants to help Jesse Plemons' character, and seeing that kind of interesting idea of Judas, who, Judas betrayed Jesus. You should ask your parents. But the idea of a Judas, someone who is conflicted, who is friends with Jesus or the Black Messiah, who would basically betray him while also believing in his message, and being betrayed by the FBI and basically given, instead of 30 pieces of silver, $300, which is a great little metaphor. I don't know if the FBI was looking to do that metaphorical thing, or they're just that ultimately evil, but probably the latter. Basically, I think this gets to the point of, you did have people in the black community who didn't fully think, thought the Black Panthers were too naive, thought that they couldn't do it, that didn't even agree with the Black Panthers. That was actually going on at the time. But, and Lakeith is sort of the stand-in for that, although he is a real person, William O'Neill. But then when you see the FBI, and predominantly there's a scene where J. Edgar Hoover asks, played by Martin Sheen, in ridiculous makeup that really I wish they hadn't done, but whatever. And then with Jesse Plemons, basically when it's not getting the reaction he wants, and even though we know that the ultimate death of Fred Hampton was led by a certain shootout event, but also that he confronts him and says, kind of straight out, would you want your daughter to bring home a black man? And he was like, well, that would never happen. J. Edgar Hoover is basically trying to appeal to these guys' racism. He wants them to react that the world is changing and they don't want that, and they're going to kill these people to make sure it doesn't happen and continue white supremacy, basically. I think this film, and what Shaka King, the director, does so magnificently, is he looks at all the angles that are going on into this. I do think crime film oftentimes, and if you look at like one of my favorite crime films I've mentioned a million times, like Public Enemy, and there's various political things going on within that film that were like, it's based on the Prohibition era, and you understand like his brother is a World War I veteran and all these things that went into their lives and how that happened. And I do actually think politics plays a lot into crime films, more than we often acknowledge. Most of the time we think about how cool they are or whatever. But this film, most times that's like subtext. That's like, I know about the period, I've read a lot about it, I'm fascinated by the movie, I'm going to look that up. Same with like Goodfellas, thus why like Scorsese's very influenced by Public Enemy. Same with like how Coppola was very influenced by Shakespeare and things like that, and the era. And if you look at Godfather 2 and everything with Cuba, when you look at Judas and the Black Messiah, that is not subtext, that is the text, and not in a stupid way, in a smart, like, you know what guys, we're not going to beat around the bush, we need to engage you with this. I don't actually know when it was shot, but I'm going to assume it was shot before COVID. And what Shaka King, the director, does is he makes a film that feels probably more timely than any film I've seen this year, particularly dealing with June and everything we had with the more rise of Black Lives Matter. Obviously that was around before, and the aftermath of George Floyd. And I think this is a film that's saying like, look, this guy was taken out mainly, he was arrested for stealing $71 of ice cream bars, which he didn't actually do, which is given like almost 2 to 3 years. It kind of shows you how awful this whole thing was, because I think when you look at the William O'Neill character, who is a real person, and what he's done and what he has given up, and he fully understands like what they could have done. That's probably what makes it more awful, is someone used racism to convince this guy to destroy something that he understood the good of it. When we talk about crime and how in crime films is portrayed as evil, or how it's like brought someone over to evil and the steps that led them to that, I think what is sadder and almost more evil about what happens in Judas and the Black Messiah is that Lakeith Stanfield in William O'Neill, you can see that confliction, but ultimately he wants to be a part of the FBI. I don't think he knows, he's almost the complicated moral center, because I don't think this film centers with the FBI, but I think he wants to be a part of that. He's impressed with who Jesse Plemons plays in this film, and he, goes to his house, and it seems like he's almost like looking at him as a mentor, where also, Fred Hampton, who's there, who is an actual mentor for people, who is doing good, but he's so distracted, he's so taken aback and decided to continue to help them and continue them taking down this voice. And the idea of the Black Messiah is something that J. Edgar Hoover didn't want a Black Messiah. He didn't want civil rights to happen, and he fought that for everything he could. And Martin Sheen, I think, does a good job of playing the cartoonishness of J. Edgar Hoover. I don't think like the makeup thing is really distracting, but I do think he actually gives a good performance. It's just that makeup like really fucks it up. What I like about this film is it's such a compelling crime film, but I also think it engages you in politics that, I've seen this in Chicago 7, which takes place at literally the same time. The events of both come into one another in interesting ways. I don't think that was a plan, or they're different companies. It's not a late 1960s cinematic universe or something, but it's such a polar opposite, because I think this wants you to look up, like, I looked up, like, William O'Neill did an interview with for a documentary called Eyes on the Prize 2, which I actually watched after this, and kind of goes into like what he did and what he knows he sort of gave up, and he seems to have some reservations at the time. What Shaka King is so smart about is, like, you could watch this film as a crime film. It's an excellently made film. It's only shot by Sean Babbage, who does most of Steve McQueen's stuff. Like, I was angry after watching. We don't really talk about this, but also that we don't, there's not a lot about the Black Panthers, and oftentimes, I know that most of this film actually happened, and Shaka King's admitted this in interviews, because Ryan Coogler was attached and because of the success of Black Panther, and they wanted to be involved with Ryan Coogler. And thank fucking God that this happened, because it's made me want to look more of this up, and not just for me personally, but I hope it helps other people, because it's such an amazing story, but it's also a story that, not that before this I was like, man, the FBI is not racist, but I think it sort of demands your attention in a way. It's radical in the way that it brings up authoritarianism, and how the main thing that scares them is helping out poor people. And they are racist, but they're also, I think the FBI in this film, it shows like what they really want to do is not help people rise up, not help, African Americans rise up, or not help anyone rise up. They want everyone to be taken. They want the status quo to stay. And that's, a lot of authorities in this country are basically there to keep in control of the society that we have and not bring about the change the society needs to have. And society needed to have it at that time, and it didn't happen the way it did. So you look at what happened to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Fred Hampton. I'm not suggesting all those were done by the FBI, but the society basically had a way to stomp that out. And seeing how it was stomped out while having someone who's between the two worlds and is almost like brought over by this evil side, and just shows you like how as a society we're never really going to get to change, because you have these people who fight that to such a degree and are able to co-opt that and make it into the society that they want rather than the society that its people need. And they're mainly killed right before they're going to make a free clinic. Like, they're still not free clinics. We still don't have good healthcare. Like, the things they were doing, we as the people, not, just people in the inner cities, not just black people, like, people need those programs. Like, those are smart programs, but especially people who are poor and need those things. And Fred Hampton was an amazing, compelling man. If you can see footage of him, he died before, he was 21 when he died. Daniel Kaluuya, I think, does an amazing job. I know he's not 21. And I know that's like one of the slight controversies, I guess, is that Daniel Kaluuya is a lot older and is not American. To me, the thing with Daniel Kaluuya doing that part is that he does such a good job of understanding how much of a compelling figure he is. I know they were thinking of casting various actors who were around that age. I think it was correct casting, but I didn't see all the auditions, so I don't, know. But I can say in the film itself, he definitely does a really, really good job and is insanely compelling as Fred Hampton. Like, you want to follow him, you understand why he's compelling, you understand his role in the community, and you understand like his thought process. You get why he's the figure he is. Lakeith Stanfield, this film is almost like, it's like watching three great character actors. It's not like, I like that there's no Daniel Kaluuya is probably more of a lead and more of a big actor because he's been in so many huge movies at this point, but to me he has more of a character actor soul, and I think that's one of the things Shaka King does a great job with. Having these like actors go toe to toe with one another is amazing, particularly like Jesse Plemons. Like, you get why he'd be compelled by him, but you also get like that there's definitely like racist evil in there, and Jesse Plemons plays it very great. But Lakeith Stanfield, I think his performance, you get that confliction, you understand that confliction, and you understand him as this character that moves between these both of these worlds, and that he has been sort of, I don't want to say radicalized, maybe just educated by the Black Panthers, but still is able to sort of destroy them and destroy Fred Hampton. It's almost like both a crime movie, it is a crime movie, but it's almost like a theft movie. It's like you see the great, like how this theft of us as a people was taken away by like a great leader like Fred Hampton. And I don't know, I think if you see this film and you just go, well, that was a well-made crime film, like you need to have some serious self-reflection into whatever the fuck is going on with you, because like it was really like watching this film, I found it insanely fascinating, but also like anger-inducing that like this happened, and although it came out and the truth was revealed, it fucking doesn't matter if the truth was revealed. Like, he was taken from us, this horrible thing happened, and he was going to help a lot of people, and that's what the FBI wanted gone. They didn't want people radicalized. And I think this is the kind of like classic film and kind of political film I really like, because it engages with you. I think a lot of times in cinema now we talk about passivity and enjoyment over helping our minds, and this film is an insanely smart crime film because it gets in there. If you like crime films, it's like one of the best I've seen in ages, but it gets in there and it gives you this information. And I think that's probably the most radical thing about it, but that shouldn't be radical, because you should know this information and you should look up these things. I will have a link to Eyes on the Prize 2. I actually want to find Eyes on the Prize 1. I'm a little confused on why it's called that, but I have seen the whole film, and if you would like to, when it was on YouTube, when I made this review, I'll have a link in the description. I'll also have that on my Twitter if you'd like to check that out. I think there's all these conversations like, what book should I read and who should I listen to and all these things, and how do I learn more. This movie wants to engage with you. This movie wants to educate you, and this movie wants to make you understand the horrible thing that happened. When you look at Judas in the biblical sense, and to my rough understanding of the Bible, what Judas did is lead to the crucifixion of Jesus and take away Jesus from the world. And that is what he did to Fred Hampton. They took away what J. Edgar Hoover was afraid of, which was a black messiah. He didn't want black people to rise up. In effect, this person who was a Christian knew entirely the evil that he was bringing about, and he went forward with it. And I don't think, I've never really liked J. Edgar Hoover. I think Martin Sheen understood the kind of horrible villainous of him, and I think this film understands the evil of the FBI at that time and the horrible thing that they were doing by doing that, and the fact that he's playing into the almost biblical evil and on purpose kind of shows that. I feel like there's so many rich things within it. Like because I guess I'm a white dude or whatever, I've been in so many situations where I've had to rewatch The Godfather, and you always find new things about it. But this felt like a film, like a great crime film, where I want to pick apart details. I'm like, did you know this scene meant that? But I think what's smart about him is what's smart about Shaka Khan as a director, who developed this with the Lucas brothers, and they were coming up with ways to develop this kind of story, and I'm glad that this all came together the way it did. But I think what he does is he takes those little things where it's like, oh, did you know there's oranges in The Godfather, because oranges are how the first thing Italians imported over to America and stuff like that. I think he took that and went like, what if, like, you don't have to look up on IMDb or an essay or a video later about that. What if I give you enough info that you have a basis of sort of what happened there? And I think that is real radicalness in a film, but it's also showing you the evil of authority and the evil that authority can wrought on you, on an organization that's trying to help the people and educate the people, and how they used evil and how they co-opted someone who they knew was co-optable and brought them over to take down something that could have helped the people just because they didn't want to lose the position that they had. I think the real crime of this is that we as people were lost one of the great minds at the time, and I think it shows what's been happening to African Americans this whole time and continues to happen, and is not something that is fucking new at all. And that's the thing that's most radical about it, is oftentimes when we talk about films that talk about the past, they're saying something about now. And what they're saying about now is this is not new, this has never changed, and this will continue to happen. And you should be engaging with this film to understand that so it doesn't happen again. I do think it probably will happen again, because I don't think anyone will learn the lessons from this. I don't think we've learned the lessons from the past, but at least Shaka King is kind of shoving it in your face and asking you to please fucking try to not let this happen again, and understand that this film wants to engage with you on a political level, because it should engage with you on a political level, because this is a story you should fucking know at this point, and we should actually listen to and understand why they did that and how really evil that is. So if you have seen Judas and the Black Messiah and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.